Rob?
Grant.
Rob Grant, Richard Altman. Okay.
There you go. Here we are, two Canadians.
Yes.
I'm in Vancouver, the California of Canada, and you are in Winnipeg.
Yes, the Winnipeg of world.
The center of Canada.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Even the center of North America.
Yes, the center of North America, like geographically speaking, definitely.
Yeah. Center of Canada, center of North America. I call it the corker drain of North America.
The corker drain.
Yeah, like it's a cork, like it's bursting out with Winnipegians like McLuhan, the Guess Who, Venetian snares. Or it's the drain where there's lots of people that come here and sort of incubate and then leave. And then it's the rest of us are like that Simpsons idea where it's like, we were born here. What's your excuse?
Yes. A Passover to some and a place to everybody else.
Yeah.
So now McLuhan, we both know Jerry. I'm just getting into him, and man, he is erudite is a good word for him. It's just like, whoa, it's hard to follow. Was he born in Winnipeg, or did he just work there as a professor?
Okay. Well, I was just looking at that information because I think I got something. I got it more correct than most people, but still slightly wrong. To answer your question, he was born in Edmonton.
Okay.
In 1911 on July 21st, and moved to Winnipeg probably. And this is where it's like there's what I'm going to tell you, and then there's like practical answers. They probably came to Winnipeg after March 1915, or possibly early 2016. Both are great. I hope it's early 2016 because just it would be fun if he moved here in the winter, as what he would be a 5-year-old. And his brother Morris was born in 1913, also in Edmonton, and he has one brother, Morris McLuhan, and then obviously Marshall McLuhan. Father's name is Herbert Ernest McLuhan, and mother's name is Elsie Naomi Hall. And I'll just throw this one out there. We can talk about it later. Yes, he is in fact related to an Annie Hall in real life. Well, that's significant because everybody knows Marshall McLuhan from the movie Annie Hall, which I've never seen except for that scene.
Wait, Marshall McLuhan is in Annie Hall?
Okay, good. So you haven't seen it either.
No.
I you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I just was never like, why would I ever want to see this? You know what I mean? If I was going to be interested in Woody Allen, it would probably be when he was like a writer. Because I just read a great book called The Comedians by a guy named Cliff, Kliph, who's actually from, we can find out after, but I think he was born in British Columbia. I think he's from Delta, BC, actually.
And his name's Cliff?
Nesterhoff, like Nesterhoff.
Okay.
And so it's like a whole, like from vaudeville till, podcasts. Really good. Came out in 2016. A great little thing about the history of, comedy as a service, so to speak, Yeah. Just switch hands here. So I'm in Assiniboine Park. And Assiniboine Park is a place that has the Real Estate Hall of Fame. I don't know if you can see any of that. It's not very bright.
Real Estate Hall of Fame.
Yeah, if we are lucky here. Geez. I should have brought.
I can see a silhouette. Silhouette.
Okay, so let me see. I don't. Normally I have a headlamp, but
I'm gonna remove myself from here for a sec so we can see it a little bit better.
Okay, so I'm gonna go right up as best as I can figure out. Okay, so we see a bit. That's the side. Here's the front. Here's the plaque. I mean, it's
we can see the plaque. Good.
Okay. Marshall Marshall McLuhan. I don't know if you can.
Mm-hmm.
You see McLuhan? It says the name McLuhan.
Yeah.
Okay. And then here you have his one eye. Anyways, the point is there. It's young Marshall, and so
right, definitely young Marshall.
Well, and that's very significant too because just gonna get.
That's when he was in Winnipeg.
Okay, so I did a shitty video in the sense of like, well, it's the 90s. People can understand profanity. I know it's 2022. I did a poor video, just like I didn't have the light just now. I also didn't bring my Zoom or had an appropriate microphone, and I had to do a lot of post-production on the audio. I got one unusual comment. I don't really know what it meant still, very Finnegan's Wake-esque, but I left it there, even though it might have been slightly insulting, but it's that vague that I don't really know. Anyway, so...
Do you recall what the comment was?
Well, it's on my... So I have... Is my display name...
Yeah.
McLuhan video. Is it McLuhan videos on YouTube and IG?
It doesn't say it on here just because of my little blurb thing at the bottom, but
okay.
I'll include it on the info, the link to your YouTube.
Okay, cool. So it's like, it's on the video talking about how he was related to Annie Hall, which for you and I, like, that's the way most people, if you talk to anyone from New York, they're going to be like, that's my favorite scene. Or you'll see on Twitter sometimes someone will say something like it's a Marshall McLuhan moment on Twitter.
Because Andy Warhol's in that scene, right?
No. And like, yeah. There's something, obviously he's connected to Andy Warhol too, just because he was incredibly popular. He was, as I put it, that Andrew has sort of like also agreed is a decent way for people to get. He was Kardashian level famous for like at least a year from like 1968 to 69. And it's like, for, I don't know if anyone's a historian, but 1968 was a fairly significant year. Very significant for a lot of sort of like how
social political reasons.
We've gone through a 1968 since, let's say, Trump became president. It's been like that every day, where it's like McLuhan would say every night on television is election night. So yeah, he has an actual Annie Hall relative on his mother's side at U of M. I'm just gonna come fast and furious with a whole bunch of stuff, and then we can really get into it. Because I'm just walking back to my car.
Now, I will say though that it might just go straight over my head some of this, but just
it's just gonna be like not theories or anything, just sort of an inventory. McLuhan loved the word inventory. I think an inventory of effects was used as a byline on either Understanding Media or Gutenberg Galaxy, I don't remember, but most people, when they say it's a Marshall McLuhan moment on Twitter, that means to them that someone's talking on a subject that they're not necessarily certified to discuss, which, these days, when you consider how fast the rate of change is going, where it's like a spinning top, where it's like, hey, do I adjust to all this, or should I just sort of start where I already am and take it slower? Because you spin the top, once it's spun, after it regains its equilibrium, you're kind of like where you were at the beginning.
Right.
And that's why he would
homeostasis.
Like it's like, and you can sort of like take that leap of faith that it's like, okay, that's the top that represents all the changes that are happening really fast, which we cannot possibly adjust to at human scale. But as humans, we can begin to understand it, or this new term I heard that's from 1981 that no one ever used, by a woman named Shoshana Zuboff, Zuboff, who just came out with a book in 2014 called Surveillance Capitalism, which I think, long story short, not reading it is like, hey, did you know that online all your actions are being used for commerce by the services that you use for free? And it's like, really? Should I look both ways before crossing the street too? So it's like, what's my moral philosophy about a pothole? Is that liberal, Democrat, NDP, or Republican? So it's like, it's all these kind of like agnostic things, where it's like, the tree doesn't have an opinion, really. No matter how many people want to represent whatever they think the tree is thinking, we will never know. Same with a pothole. Same with any kind of...
And we anthropomorphize these things.
Well, yeah. And I mean, but then it's tricky because they are extensions of our senses. But it's like, do you really know how you feel about smelling? Only when you can't smell do you really think about smelling in your life as an art form or something you miss. Nostalgia these days is hilarious. I'm pretty sure I'm lost. But anyways, that's fine.
There's a word for it. Maybe you might know, but there's an actual concrete word for when you look at the past and you think that it was the golden days when really it was just as shitty as any day is. There's a word for that. But it's not like nostalgia or anything. It's the actual act of you falsely remember the past as being the golden days when really you were just an anxious teenager like everybody else or whatever.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And I think like the idea of human scale is sort of an interesting one because it's like I'm walking right now and all the, things like I'm going to put a glove on, all the things that you have to deal with at human scale or mechanical scale as opposed to, 1 second. Oh, we still there? Okay.
Yeah.
Like the tactility as things have imploded onto the screen, so much of the memory, muscle memory, neural memory, whatever term that hasn't come up yet that will eventually be monetized through some type of service or product, all the things that are lost in the tactility of the screen are contributing to this rough adjustment that we're having to what I call the Nasturization of society.
Nasturization of society. Oh, yeah. Dude, you got to tell me what that means.
Well, first of all, I'll always preface everything because I think I had a lot of head injuries as a child. I'm an Aries and tend to find any type of obfuscating of my own contributions to be difficult because it's like the first person that came up with TV, there was no first person. There were several people. And the only difference is who kind of networked the best. Don't you find pretty much every idea has been thought of, but not everybody has the resources to kind of fulfill it. But we've all sort of been like, oh yeah, I thought about that.
And oftentimes the first person to do it, they're a complete flunk. Like Enron, they kind of almost were the Netflix precursors to the internet or whatever. Yeah.
March 2001, Wall Street Journal has a headline talking about how Blockbuster or Netflix or Enron have decided we're not going to pursue the video on demand space in March 2001. Nah. You know what? Too much. People. It's like people ... want ... Steve Jobs even said nobody's going to watch YouTube because it's like amateur hour. They want professional level content. So it's like. Yeah. So it's like you can't. It's like when you get so frustrated with people and you realize it's not them. They're not stupid, but they're just so scared to have any kind of faith that how they perceive or understand it is enough for them to continue to think about on, God forbid, their own understanding. They need to have some tactile bias given to them to kind of shift the possible blame of being wrong as if it's impossible to ever change your mind. I mean, I don't understand what the hang up is with people, and that's back to this Nasturization and how fast things are happening is that it began with Napster. They were kicked into the 21st century in 99, where their physical human scale industry was gone. And they didn't really realize that for another 10 years till now. That 10 years later, so what? That's 99. And then you can kind of measure it from when did Spotify get their monthly subscriptions, where people finally realized that's how it's going to go. You're not going to be able to compete. It's like Amazon, or when people are excited about Uber, it's like, what is happening? It's just a text message saying, Oh wow, I really walked far out. They're like, all you're doing is sending, I want this. I'm at my home. I want this. That's a text message. That's like saying, hey, mom, floor hockey's over. Can you pick me up now when you're 10 years old? It's no different. It's just sending an instruction and someone then getting it and fulfilling it. Whether it's any, skip the dishes, DoorDash, doesn't matter. It's all the same dynamic. The only difference is who's got the network, which brings us to NFTs. They're like, it's a community. Okay, yeah, fine. But really, it's like Comic-Con for really rich people. And then the instruments that are available to you to maintain your money by calling yourself an art collector of like basically a bunch of stuff that looks like it was ripped off from a Gorillaz video. I mean, don't you notice that the overall stylistics of like popular NFTs look like kind of like extras from a video from Gorillaz that were never drawn by the Jamie Hewlett who drew? He made up Gorillaz and Tank Girl. But if you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club or any of the subsequent things, they look like the members of Gorillaz like fans. Like in the cartoon world, most of the NFTs would be in the audience. So I thought that having it in a video from August 1st.
Okay.
So you see what I'm saying? It's like the style is the same. The little NFT people who each cost like $69 million, they're in the audience of a Gorillaz concert. Now, this is all animated. It doesn't really exist outside of the scale of the mechanics to bring it to you, which is a screen, some elements from Africa to create the cell phone. And then, again, the chattering chickens of the obvious go on social media and talk about it. And that's fine. That's how it is. Okay, no, I wasn't as lost as I thought it was. I'm just going to go straight through the snow. Because I wear glasses, but if I put them on, they'll just be foggy. So I'm like operating on several sort of like intuitive senses here. But yeah.
While communicating.
Well, shit, man. I mean, discourse, dialogue is the only, it's the divine word for reason. Technology, whether it's the printing of a book, language itself, or wearing, the next, when we don't have to wear goggles, whatever like the video game verse is, where people say like, oh, Doge, that's dumb. Not if you're watching a movie with your friends in a virtual environment and, all the social dynamics come into play. You might want to flirt with a girl in the movie as an audience member, and you change what you're wearing. Your virtual avatar change what it's wearing, and a bunch of people start talking about it in the thing. These things are going to happen.
Right.
They're going to be stories talked about by like headlines. They're going to be like, oh, someone did that, followed by the amount that it created from everybody else that began to want to do that because that person's famous already.
Mm-hmm.
Like 9 Inch Nails sold after Radiohead gave away an album saying, name your price. 9 Inch Nails did the same thing. No advertising, made a lot of money. Metallica didn't have a video until their 4th album. Word of mouth never goes away.
Right.
But once word of mouth is amplified in this post-literate environment, unprecedented.
Yes. Okay. All right. So social media is just word of mouth rampant.
Amplified word of mouth with with all the excitement that a litigious individual, because it says legal tender for a reason. NFTs are just smart contracts. And a smart contract, when we upload this video or after it's been streamed live, again, the most valuable thing about understanding what we're talking about right now will be the fact that it's January 13th, 2022 at 3:49 Pacific and at Central Standard Time, 5:49. That will allow whoever consumes this in the future to understand the weight of understanding at the time that this happened. And that's the upload date. That's the metadata. So the metadata is legal. That is a legal document. The court system brings us back to Homer because there's always an oral
Homer, like
argument. Yes.
Yeah.
That's an oral argument. The oral, in the hierarchy of technology, clearly, in the hierarchy of technology, the spoken word is number one.
Because it came first.
Gestures are like the prototype. Gestures are like the alpha iteration. But the shipped version that becomes like the version that everyone like gets a Facebook account or gets a Twitter account or gets an iPhone, that's the spoken word. That's the realized version. Friendster, MySpace, that's gesture.
Okay.
Useful, but not enough, you know?
But it wasn't as seamless in terms of communication.
It wasn't as seamless. It wasn't as intuitively understood.
Because this is like social media now is effervescent. It's like a new layer of our milieu.
It's the unconscious made visual.
Yeah.
And the latency of reacting to it consciously. And again, conscious, unconscious, visual classifications just shows you the power of the word that we are even able to classify. But you're only able to classify with the power of writing. And you're only able to really learn at scale and have this potential 100th monkey stuff because of the printing press.
Explain that 100th monkey.
100th monkey is the idea that like there are these monkeys. There's some anthropologist, Margaret Mead.
Yeah. It can't just be one monkey. It can't just be one.
It has to reach some kind of scale of some sort.
A critical mass, and then it's just out.
And then it seems to amplify.
Yeah.
As if in like some invisible infrastructure, psychic or otherwise, where like you have these monkeys. I just want to say, you know, it's like in Winnipeg, if you live with snow for a long time, all the figures become new grounds because the ground itself is just white.
Right.
So it's like you're in this endless art gallery where anything you look at is like a portal. And it's like, whether it's a tree, whatever it is, candy wrapper, a can, whatever, if it's on the snow is invisible. It becomes a new language, just like language has no ground. The alphabet has no ground. So it's funny, McLuhan would say, we consider the left side of the brain the logical side because it does reading and writing and arithmetic, because the number is the shadow of the letter. But there's no ground to it, so it's actually more abstract than the right side of the brain, which is always finding the artistic synthesis between figure ground. Anyway, you know, in the end, you talk about this stuff. McLuhan was like the most astute because he had 5 degrees in literature, one of them being a PhD. He uses the most innate form to communicate: books, essays, and then elocution because of his mother. And he understood all the narrative constructs from the cave painting. Cave painting wasn't meant for an audience, clearly. It was more psychic, like, here's a buffalo. Please bring buffaloes here so we can eat. It's in a cave. No one's going to see that for 18,000 years. Altamira or whatever. Altimira. So you have like all this stuff happening, but ultimately it's always the same thing. It's like you meditate on what it means. It's in that silent process. Like between when I go like this, I don't know what's between my index finger and my thumb. That's an interval. But
there is a space.
That's an interval, not a connection. And it's in those spaces. That's where the action is. But you're the author. That's what scares the shit out of people. They're on the hook. And Marshall didn't mind being on the hook because he had 5 degrees in literature, a mother who was an elocutionist, and a father who loved to bullshit from day to night. So he could talk forever. And it would be perfect. So TV didn't freak him out. People will never be as articulate and insightful on television. And the way the CBC characterizes him, where after he got his brain surgery in November 67, that everything he said was like some kind of like incontinent brain fart. That's a load of shit. Because he could totally read, he could totally write, There's footage of him at U of T, January 79, being incredibly articulate. I saw another thing where he's on a panel with Ralph Nader and Ted Turner in 79. So, you know, when he wrote this great piece from McLean's magazine, also in 79. So it's like...
So sorry to interrupt there.
I'm sorry for talking so much.
No. I'm following along. But when there's pieces when I'm like, okay, explain that, I'm gonna ask. Yeah. So he had brain surgery.
November 67. November 67. He has the longest brain surgery at that time to remove a tumor. Mm-hmm. And what do you call it? And it worked out. But on Extraordinary Canadians, narrated by Douglas Copeland, he's like, oh, after that, McLuhan became passe. How could he not? He couldn't even read. Literally says he couldn't even read after that. Total garbage. Mm-hmm. In fact, he says the man and media speech at York University in 75, which is mistakenly by Tom Wolfe and I think Stephanie McLuhan, they put 79, but that's not the point. That thing has the greatest stuff on it because I'm in like almost knee-deep snow. He realized that the extension of media, digital, I don't know, it's all in the movies, but it's like he's starting to write laws of media. He's starting to figure out the tetrad, which, you know, in our current milieu, the philosophical meme creators, the ones that have names like, I like the real McLuhan, good guy, but like Dank Deleuze or No Stash Nietzsche, you could tell these are a bunch of nice guys and gals who went to university, had their minds blown, probably without the benefit of drugs. And now it's like, so what am I supposed to do with this? How can I get a job with this? But because everything's changing so fast, in the metaverse, there'll be 1 million comedy clubs. There'll probably be meme clubs where you have an open mic, but you make a meme and there's an audience and they can tip you. Hooray, I figured out the economy. Thanks, Rob. It's going to happen.
What? Are you familiar with David Lynch?
Of course.
Yeah. Silly question. But what was the movie that he had the all the mice and there was a laugh track and it was really eerie? Rabbits. Yeah, rabbits.
Yeah.
But there was something about that was just like, we were left thinking like, what the hell is this? But it was really just a satire of us.
Yes.
And McLuhan was a satirist.
The sitcom prototype turned inside out into a new archetype because now all this nostalgia that made us feel good, the laughing, is being applied to almost the same scenario with a different lighting structure and rabbits that are human scale. So it's like a dream. And dreams are like a secret coming right up to you and saying, hello. But it's a secret. You've never seen it before. That was, according to Gerald O'Grady. Oh, good. Some flat land. According to Gerald O'Grady, that's at Northrop Frye. I'm going to catch my breath. Northrop Frye, his complaint about McLuhan was that he could only take in about 10% of what he was saying to him every time they met. And he said, then when I'd meet him again, it'd be another 90% of new stuff. He's like, so I just avoid him. And he said it matter-of-factly. He didn't mean it as an insult. But if you're a specialist and you've got an audience, your obligation is kind of like a navigator. And when you're like, okay, I can get from Winnipeg to Winnipeg Beach with my eyes closed as a passenger based on how the car sounds. And then all of a sudden, you've gone through, you've all made it through a teleportation service, and it's got not, back, upside down, and sideways. And sideways is something you've never even thought of, even unconsciously. And that's where you're going. That's where you're at. And everyone's like, what's this? So that's when the bullshit begins.
Are we surrendering our intuitions for our inventions?
The intuition can never be surrendered because we don't know what we are ever. That's that part in the middle.
Right.
Like, that
and particles, and are they light rays or are they waves?
What's our best definition? What's our best definition of atoms? Subatoms. And what's the best definition of them? Probability patterns. So no definition at all. In fact, the definition is no definition. It's probably. Yeah. When a definition begins with probably, nothing can be applied. So
but we hate probably. We want certainty.
Well, that's why it's like everyone's so kind of like against organized religion, and it's like, okay, they have a point, because the probability pattern was turned into the manuscript version of whatever the faith is, and then into the print version, and then Martin Luther, and it's just kind of like it becomes more about who is doing the adjustments. And then you have the phrase, I think it's called trattatore trutador. It's Italian, and it means a translator is always a traitor, in that you can't help but make the mistake of interpretation. There's always going to be flaws, and there's a Butthole Surfer song. It's like, you never know just how you look from other people's eyes. The camera gives us an idea now, and then you got the Kardashians again, who I like them. But the plastic surgery is like, it's probably like, you ever see pictures of Kim when she's 18 or 20 or 24? She's probably a lot more prettier because there's been less. You look at James Hetfield in 1989 on And Justice for All, no tattoos. Now, why people do this? Because they're just people. I'm not going to hold them up and being like, hey, you're like a tree. No, they're a person. I can't get mad at a tree, but and I'm not going to get mad at a person for deciding to get a tattoo or getting plastic surgery. Not for me, but hey, I'm not the one out there by choice or by accident, and that's why it's kind of like it's scary to like become, get an audience.
Yeah.
The expectation is now for you to become part of the milieu when you're only and always just you, and you don't necessarily know what you are. You try to do as much conscious good and at least conscious bad. That's all you can do. That's all anyone can do, no matter where they are.
But once you become famous or whatever,
you got to really understand what that means.
Imagine Justin Bieber, for example. Man, the guy became famous when what? He was 12?
Imagine all these YouTubers. Imagine all these TikTokers. All of a sudden, it's like a job. It's like
surveillance constantly.
Probably don't feel like doing it like a job, because that's usually, if it's not, McLuhan would say, and other people have said, work is not, play is not work. So if your work is play, then if you're making art, that's
right.
It's play.
You always
want play. Yeah. Play, not work. Taxes is becoming more play-like, but a lot of times, the print structure by its nature gave us specialism. You can't criticize it. It's just a characteristic of the effects of print. But we only know that now. But
McLuhan was more eclectic.
He was aware. He understood the electronic environment began with the telegraph.
But he wasn't a specialist. He was an eclecticist.
Or generalist, eclecticist.
Generalist, yeah.
He had a specialty. He had a degree. But he was aware. That's the whole, there's no surprise if you're prepared kind of thing. I mean, it sounds like the Boy Scouts, but it's like there's no surprise if you understand the environment. And that's why he was always like, don't look at the figure, look at the ground.
Yes.
Because if you understand the ground, then you understand the figure. It doesn't make it any easier, because you still have to have this understanding at scale, and people are never going to be in concert with understanding at the same time. With the 100th monkey thing, so once the 100th monkey dipped his potato in the salt water, apparently, according to some anthropologists, other monkeys that are being studied at the same time began to do that. Now, there may be a story. There's another example of it with a plant. 2 plants mature in the same room, then one plant, and they're both being measured with measuring instruments that are sensitive. And so the other plant goes in another room. They cut a leaf off. And at the exact moment they cut the leaf off of the one plant that was in the room but is no longer in the room, apparently the plant that was initially there reacted. The sensitivity picked up some kind of reaction at the exact same time. Right when I said the sensitivity, I slipped. So that's kind of like, okay, well, that's like if you say something and someone sneezes, someone might say, well, that it's true. So there's always this kind of like unconscious grammar of nature that kind of underscores what we do if we're sensitive enough to notice. And of course, that's subjective and all that stuff, but still makes for a good thought to think about.
How did you discover Marshall McLuhan? Like, how did you come to this?
Wired magazine. In the early 90s, Wired was cool because it would have these sort of like static picture collages made with Photoshop, but like in 93 and 94. I had never seen stuff like that. And so I'm just going to keep walking. I got a lot of battery. So they had these static photo collages, and they would talk about the effects of technology. But I was a young guy then. I was in my early 20s, and I was just like, I liked video games. I had an Atari. That's my sort of like my era. Early 80s is when I was playing video games. Went to the arcade. So Wired magazine had kind of the excitement of when I ran out of quarters or tokens. And that's how I knew crypto was going to be exciting, which I'll tell you in a second about how it relates to my arcade experience. They had these things, and on the masthead of Wired, let's say in 94, at the bottom of like editor-in-chief Louis Rossetto, founder Jane Metcalf, and then Kevin Kelly, who's a famous author who talks about technology. So they had the best writers. Camille Paglia would be in there. And at the very bottom of every issue, until they got bought by Condé Nast, they had a picture of this guy in black and white with a quote that would say something like, justice requires, or like, sort of like, guiltiness needs to be sped up, but justice takes time. A typical sort of McLuhan synthesis of opposites. And there would be in every issue a different picture and a different quote. Or the same picture, but definitely different quotes. And I was like, well, that's right on. This guy knew what that's interesting.
It was always Marshall McLuhan.
Every single time. Like, so it's like, edited by editor-in-chief, founder, editor-in-chief, contributors, and then the rest of the credits, the contact info, and at the very bottom, picture of Marshall, really tiny, like tiny. And then a quote. And then occasionally, like Negative Land, the band that does like audio collage and video collage. I heard about them through Mondo 2000 magazine in the 90s. Also, that was like on a futurist sort of like, they were really meditating on the effects of the internet before the internet was at scale.
Right.
Where like internet really became at scale with Napster. When people got broadband between like 99, when the corporate services of like T1 lines became slower than broadband, that's when all of a sudden you have the consumer at the same level as the corporate. Right. That's really what we're dealing with now with the Nasturization, is that music industry gone with Napster. Presidency 2016 gone because of Twitter, which that process began. Do you remember that guy landed a plane they made that movie Sully?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I never saw it, but the guy that took the picture in real life of the plane on the Hudson, he posted it to TwitPic because Twitter didn't even let you have pictures then. And all of a sudden, the entire broadcast news industry got scooped, and it was over. Now they're just talking heads reading what's happening on Twitter. That began like in 2008 or 2009. So now with Trump at the end of Twitter being like, I'm going direct. Because I mean, at first it was like celebrities went on Twitter and be like, oh, I don't need to use my publicist as much. I can endear myself to fans and let them know about whatever.
Yeah.
The movie, I don't have to go on a talk show.
I can speak off the cusp. Yeah.
I can speak off the cuff. Yeah. And if I'm smart about it, I can avoid having to go on talk shows. And if I do it rarely on Twitter, people will make a huge well, this would be a huge deal if Brad Pitt said anything on Twitter, because he doesn't ever do anything. People will be like, whoa! And they talk about it. They fuel for like a week. And so now it'd be fuel for like a day. But now, because there's, it's no longer, it's not a secret how they did it. You have all these things that came out, and with the free speech sort of like stuff, and the things that trend on Twitter, which are like basically just gossip, sort of National Enquirer stuff, but a woke. Twitter's like a woke National Enquirer.
Well. As soon as they censored Trump, again, I don't like the guy, but as soon as they kicked him off, it was like, now there's a meridian.
It's like I never liked the Sex Pistols either until like 30 years after, or a long time after. I was like, it's okay. I mean, it's all right. I like it more now. But I think that was the thing with Trump. The reason why he got so mammoth was like, well, it's the end of specialism, which subconsciously means it's the end of print as the default mode of transporting data. It's like, I don't have to read anymore. I can just go on YouTube, get someone else to do it, and get 50 other opinions, and then make my own opinion. And I can speak all my queries into the microphone, so I can just become a couch. And at first, it might seem like a good idea, but ultimately, you're now a couch. So it's like, it's the pot, it's a slowly boiling pot with the frog in it. That's what's, imagine anything any mechanical scale scenario. Digitization comes and makes it more convenient, but the double-edged sword of that is you're now the frog in the pot, but you don't know you're in the pot. And now we have, do this. Oh, no, sorry, do that. Oh, it's this number. No, it's that number. Oh, it's that. Now it's this number. Oh, that guy, he lied. I got it from an email. The email is a lie, and you're a liar for reading that email. You know what I mean? It's just like,
but
we aren't
also
prepared for the effects.
Also, our existence has been incredibly shaped by the internet.
Where my car is.
For example,
I mean, just right now, the effect of this, or I can't wear my glasses. Oh shit! The other effect is this came out of my. See, that's sorry. That's the poetic cosmic meta narrative. I can hear me and you now. Sorry.
Well, so have you read this book, Delusions of Crowds, or seen it?
No, but like there's like Elias Canetti, Crowds in Power. I was just kind of looking at that, and then there's like Dio Mob Rules. When you listen to Fools, Mob Rules.
When you listen to Fools, the Mob Rules.
It's like when you listen to Fools, the Mob Rules. So there's always those like kind of poetic gestures that tell more in a gesture than any number of books can express. But what is the insight that he says, William?
Well, in the epilogue, I'll save you 383 pages of reading. He says, in other words, we're likely doomed to limp along with our Stone Age minds on a space age planet.
In Man and Media and Man, 1975 York thing, he says, there's a book by AEO someone, and it's the same insight where it's like our brains and their instincts were made for the natural environment. Our instincts mean nothing in a man-made environment. And this is a man-made environment. But this, I know it's going to be cool. That's natural environment. Here's a quote that blew me away about McLuhan. And obviously there's many. He's talking to Tony Schwartz. That's the guy that Tony Schwartz wrote a book called The Responsive Chord. Did you ever see this like old presidential commercial talking about the effects of nuclear war? And it shows like a little girl with a daisy.
Yeah, and then
that's Tony Schwartz. That's
2, 1. Yeah.
That's Tony Schwartz. He created that commercial. So him and Marshall, when Marshall was in New York in the 66 to 69, he was either at Fordham, and when he was at Fordham in 69 or 68, he spent a lot of time with Tony, and Tony was like an audio engineer, and so every one of the conversations is recorded, huge groups on the phone. And so McLuhan says, I just realized that when you're on the air, on the telephone, or what we're doing, you don't have an identity in a natural sense. You're not subject to the laws of nature. You don't have no gravity, nothing. And so when you're in that environment and you don't have an identity, you can't have any morals because you don't know what's wrong or right because it's not a natural environment. Only in a natural environment can you even have morals, and morals might stem from knowing that you've been told snow is cold. If you don't dress for it, you're going to die. Right. And then you're like, you're dead. So it's like we're dealing with all these instincts from millions or from thousands of years that can apply to an environment we're spending all of our time in.
Yes.
And the only sort of precedent we have for navigation, well, that's a complicated answer. I don't even think there is an answer. I think that it's definitely got literature involved in it because that's our kind of oldest technology. And then print. And then now, post-literate, which is like, you see the technology allows you to do something you never could do before the technology. And then you go backwards. Like, let's say like Beck the musician, who has a connection to Winnipeg, but who doesn't? He performed on Saturday Night Live. I think like The New Pollution, I think is the ironic name of the song, which you could say all the incidental metadata we're creating is a form of pollution.
Sure.
And I'm not an environmentalist, but I mean, like, by turning our unconscious into a visual medium, we're now wading through everybody's unconscious. And so we have a visual for the unconscious. That's all the things that we don't read as we're scrolling vertically, or all the video. You know how much is uploaded to YouTube a year?
Oh, I can't even begin to imagine.
18,000 years. Yeah.
Every year.
So there could be aliens could come here, civilize us, come back, become something else, having that get accepted, and then another civilization come here. We wouldn't even have dented. It wouldn't even be the tip of the iceberg. It wouldn't even be the tip of the tip. That's how much content humans make, and the machines that they make.
And the internet was invented so that we could communicate after nuclear war. Yeah,
ARPA, then DARPA, and then the first email from, I mean, we've seen that, like, that movie by Werner Herzog is like, today, none of the citizens is aware that this is the origin of something. Like, it's like one little fucking email was sent from one university, I think University of Southern California. It's like,
right.
The University of Southern California. Anyway, but yeah, like, and I think that's where the moralistic element is. Like Tony Schwartz's second book, no one talks about it. What's it called? The Second God. And he's like, Marshall goes, oh, is he any relation to the first one? He's like, haha. But yeah, what do you mean? He's like, well, so he's like, God made man and he made man moral. And then McLuhan's already like, ho. And then he's like, and now man made media and he's trying to make that moral. And that's really what's happening.
Media moral. We're trying to make media moral.
Right, because Sam Butler said the biology of our human mind, of ourselves, and this is like in the 1700s, in some book called Erewhon, which is the name of the famous grocery store in Calabasas where the Kardashians are from. And backwards, you spell Erewhon, it means nowhere. And nowhere is the origin of the word utopus, or as we know it, utopia. Literally means nowhere.
And Utopia means nowhere.
That's right.
Well, utopia is nowhere. It's impossible, but yeah.
Exactly. Because it's our own man-made or human-made definition.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Which is like, we have no way to really know.
Because that's not nature. That's culture.
Well, and it then has various correspondences with all the tales of the Bible. It's like, how will I know? Oh, you'll know. And it's like, you'll know when you know. It's like, okay. It's up to me. You know what I mean? That's terrifying. The present, as McLuhan would say, is terrifying for people. They just want
the present.
The present, and he'll be like, the future is the present, which makes sense because it's, break that down, present, so it's already here, even without knowing that. And the person that said that for McLuhan was his friend Gerald Feigen, Feigen, Gen. Jerry Fagan and Howard Gossage were the two individuals who were responsible for McLuhan being mentioned on a popular show of the late 60s called Laugh-In. And that's where you get Marshall McLuhan, "What are you doing?" said by Henry Gibson. I have both times he said it. I have in tons of videos that are online. I can't believe I've been able to do this the whole time outside. This has been lucky because it was like minus 30 with the wind chill last week.
It's minus. What is it right now?
I think right now they said it was minus 23. I don't believe that. It feels more like nothing. Like I don't, because there's no wind. So I think it's
just cold. It's like a straight down cold.
Tops minus 12.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in the car anyway just because it'll be better fidelity, and I still got lots of battery. And then I'll put my glasses on. So it'll be great. What was I gonna say? So what? Ultimately, though, I didn't like the William guy. What was he saying? Like, was he saying that like we don't know how to deal with this tech? Oh, we're gonna be led by our Stone Age mind.
Well, he's just speaking about like delusions in general and talking about how we have sort of two systems. We have our rational thinking brain, and then we have our feeling brain and how it responds to the environment. And we can try and rationalize and explain away all that we can, but at the end of the day, we love stories.
Yes.
Right? We're drawn to stories. I mean, that's why we love Harry Potter, right?
Yeah. I was just thinking of that.
And that you can never, like, try as you may. I mean, Joseph Goebbels kind of mastered it, but don't appeal to logic. Appeal to emotions.
Yes.
And that's how you win people over. And hey, this whole the Bitcoin cryptocurrency thing.
Yeah.
All you got to look at there's nothing sure to send a man crazy than watching his friends get rich. That's not my quote, but it's somebody else's. And so many of these
oh wow.
That's a wicked beard.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. I hope you. I thought I was trying to make you think it was all snow, but yeah. Okay, making it. There's nothing. Well, that's like showed Goebbels. It was a Nazi in charge of propaganda.
Yeah.
And the phrase that you just mentioned, that sounds like one specialist sort of vector to emanate out of Schadenfreude or Schadenfreude. It's not that I should succeed; it's that my friends must fail.
Right.
I mean, like that's the funny part about all of this is that like it's all so the same. Success is like so elusive to truly understand because you have all those people who's like, oh, he had everything. Why did he kill himself?
Yeah.
Or it's like, like
obviously he didn't. Obviously something was terribly missing.
Yeah, or you have like you have your job. It's like a scenario that let's say isn't for everybody. You live alone, you have your 12-hour job, you come home, you do your thing, you have your weekends, whatever little bit, and you just you try. And it's like that you'd find out that this person's like has some correspondence with like Mensa or something, or even that they don't, but like there's something about them, that makes it like it works for them. And then you have people that are like lucky enough to have kids and like it works out and they teach them, what accountability means. Probably more important than empathy, because it's like McLuhan would say, like, playing it by ear, which is TV, because it's in some this is me talking, because it's in the uniform frame of a television, everything seems empathetic. So when you're growing up emotionally, you think like, oh, I understand. And when you're like in that situation that you think you're in real life based on something that you've only ever seen in a fabrication of media, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm exactly like that character in that show or movie. It's unfair. And all of a sudden you're like an advocate or an activist for like something that you got inspired by seeing something on television. And it's just there to exist between the commercials. You know what I mean?
This lady did interviews on German internment camps for concentration camps for Jewish prisoners. She was doing interviews on these prison guards towards the end of their life. And one of the people she interviewed said, one of the former guards said, the trouble with the world today is that people who have never been tested go around making judgments about people who have. Yeah. And it's like, holy shit. Who are we? Right?
It reminds me of something Charlie Benite, the drummer from Anthrax, said about what it's like to be online. And it's this uniformity that happens. We're all communicating through this. And so the uniformity and its intended characteristic effect is that, again, another quote that relates to this quote. Andy Warhol talking about Coca-Cola. He's like, the bum on the corner drinks the same kind of Coke. Liz Taylor drinks the same kind of Coke. And the president drinks the same kind of Coke. Every Coke is the same. It's a fungible token. And none of them are any different. And so when we're communicating online, you have these people who are innocent or new. And they have no sense of like understanding of the history of the figures that they're interacting with, because interaction is a characteristic of this technology. So you have someone saying like, that drummer sucks. And then the drummer, it's also, again, fucking the Marshall McLuhan moment. Now, Rob, the scene goes like this. Woody Allen is in line for a movie talking to Annie Hall, I guess, or whatever the lady's name is, the actress, Diane Keaton. When I was a busboy, I gave her water once at a restaurant. Why? She was in Winnipeg. There's the only reason why anybody from Hollywood comes to Winnipeg. Cheap movie making. Anyway, that's fine. That's Canada. That's the same reason why they're all in Vancouver. I mean, you think the people from Riverdale
Hollywood
are in
North.
Vancouver because Hollywood Northwest. Toronto's Hollywood North. Winnipeg is like,
yeah.
Like, oh, you don't know what's going to happen here.
It's Hollywood East, even though Toronto's east of Winnipeg.
Winnipeg's just the Bermuda Triangle of Hollywood.
Sure.
Anyways, yeah.
You're talking about
so
Annie
they're
Hall.
in line. They're in line. So Diane Keaton, I guess her name's Annie Hall. They're in line and they hear some guy, some Columbia University professor. The guy's name is like, in real life, something Horton. And we'll get to the cosmic meta narrative in a second. They're in line. He's complaining about, or he's talking about his interpretation of McLuhan. He's talking about McLuhan, saying the difference between hot and cold media. And he's saying,
yes.
like hot media is like, unique. I'm paraphrasing. Cool media is general, which is essentially what it means. Yeah. And so then Woody's like, this guy's talking about McLuhan. He knows nothing about McLuhan. And then the guy hears him and he's like, what do you mean? It's a free country. Immediately, the moment you mention free country, you're a Republican. So it's like, he's like, I can give my opinion about McLuhan. I'm qualified. I'm a teacher at Columbia. So then he's like, oh yeah, well, I happen to have McLuhan right here. So that's like Charlie Benite, the drummer from Anthrax, seeing in the comment thread below a YouTube video about some, let's say 10-year-old that's like, this guy sucks. And then when you see like, that young lady who like is the great drummer, some 10-year-olds are actually better than, because they have all this YouTube to practice to. Inevitably with the technology, we're going to get better with repetition if we have the material to learn from. Anyway, constant table all these insights. They don't even need to come back to you. It's just a characteristic that only right now in an interview do you have the patience and passion to articulate. But other than that, they can remain unsaid, but understood. Anyway. So he brings McLuhan out. McLuhan says, I heard what you said. You think my whole fallacy is wrong. And then he says, how you got to get a job as a teacher is amazing. Now, McLuhan said that at other times. He said something along the lines of like, there'd be at the end of a lecture or a speech or a talk, there'd be questions. And someone would say something. And then McLuhan would say like, oh, right. Well, if I had said what you just said, I'd agree with you. So it's the same kind of thing where it's saying like, you don't even misunderstand me correctly.
Right.
Like you're not listening.
And it's Freud's narcissism of small differences, right? Like, what are you really fighting over?
Exactly. It's like, you know, it's like you're not
God
listening.
damn it, I'm a Lutheran, you know, like but you guys still believe the same shit, right?
Do you know that joke by Emo Phillips?
No.
I'll paraphrase that one. It's like, he's, you know, like, oh, are you a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. Are you a Christian such and such? Yeah, I'm a Christian such and such. Are you a Christian such and such, such and such? Yeah, I'm a Christian such and such. Are you a Christian such and such from the school of so-and-so? Yeah. And this goes on like 18 times. Yeah. And then on the 19th time, there's a difference and the guy kills him and he says, heretic.
Right.
So it's like, it's funny that the technological bias unleashes this emotional passion that has obviously never surfaced in our existence. And for some people, it is too much to handle. And they have to react like either the guy in line saying like, it's my right, or it's like, it's my right. And I just so happen to have made a tiny nuclear bomb and I'm sending into another dimension. What do you think about that? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always like a childlike sort of like, extreme violent wah. When it's like the adult realizes you cannot develop the ego unless there's consensuality, because that's the only way you knew. And it can't be trickery. It's got to be full, honest transparency for anything, or else you can't develop an ego, because lying is not a skill and anyone can do it. So there's nothing to be proud of by being able to pull one over on someone else without them giving you permission to.
Right.
That's like, there's nothing else. Like that's that human level, human scale. That's it. Anyone can lie. So if you want to lie, yeah, sure. Like the typical cliche, do I look fat in this? That's not even a lie. That's not nothing. That's like, you know, that is, my opinion, not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like McLuhan would say, you can only have a philosophical conversation with a stranger. With everyone else that you know, it's gossip. Yeah. If you know the person, it's gossip, because you know the person, so you're automatically already changing everything about what you're expressing. But if you I
also think it's easier to perform and present art or creativity to strangers than to your.
Yeah, and then you imagine all these YouTubers and TikTokers who are now like having to experience what, just say Julia Roberts or, you know, Clark Gable or like famous people. All of a sudden, it's a perpetual stranger.
Yeah,
the audience feels they know you. That's limited empathy on that, but you know, you get there. We are learning. I think that is somewhat of our destiny, to be able to handle the human tribe experience, because that's what it is. Whoa. No matter what you are in the human tribe. What are you going to say now? Oh, we have to have human bathrooms. You know what I mean? When does it end? You know, like at what point do all the variations be like, well, what can't we argue about? Do we have to go to space to have a petty conversation?
But that goes back to accountability, right?
Yes.
Like this idea of now, bear with me for a second, but people who are like, I'm triggered. It's like, well, fucking deal with your trigger then. Like, you can't ask this person who's never met you to suddenly adapt to your specific needs. You know what I mean? Like, if you're
like, well, and here's the equivalency. You bought tickets to go see a play for some reason, and then the understudy has to do it. It's like, I'm on stage in front of the audience. I don't know this scene, director, and starts acting like there's no audience there.
Yeah.
Like, what is this the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie by Louis Buñuel? Is this Jackass? Is this part of like, oh, it's behind the scenes of the behind the scenes of the behind the scenes? It's a Russian doll of like showing you what it is, and that's the content? Or it's like you and I talking right now. If we were to show the dialogue, it's like, oh, Richard put his finger in front of the thing, and it shows action. Richard puts his finger in front of the iPhone. But if we're playing it back and we show that script, are we improvising that, or are we following a script? So it's like, you can't answer that. That's chicken egg stuff. That's this. What's in the middle? Why is there a light on the side of my head right now? So the cosmic meta narrative, back to the Annie Hall thing, and I can understand and remember that because I don't smoke marijuana. Anyways, the point is this. I used to, but I haven't for like over 15 years. Anyways, the guy, his name was like something Horton. He went on, and this is a perfect segue, to star in a movie, Finnegan Begin Again, and he was in Mary Tyler Moore show as a funeral director. And there's a quote, or there's a title in Cliche to Archetype from Finnegan's Wake, "Fun for All, Funeral." And then Marshall says, "Fun for all in Finnegan's Wake, high culture, low culture, and high culture. You know, there's high culture and low culture. Fun for all in Finnegan's Wake. Fun for all's funeral. The keys to Given is the keys to heaven at the end. And River Run, well, I'll just be like, in Winnipeg, there's the Red River. But, you know, and that, like, in Dublin, it's called, like, the river they're talking about is called, Eric talks about it, it's like the Anna Liffey. Anna Liffey is the river, or the Liffey River. That's where you get Anna Liffey pluribel, because that's the water. And that's the gossipacious nature of the oral. And then, you know, Here Comes Everyone might be post-literacy. I don't remember exactly, but what I can tell you, about what I know about Finnegan's Wake and what got me interested in it is, A, it was a great thing for me to model my style over, because it's all styles. It's an all-time dream time from top to bottom, every possible connotation that you can fit on a page. I heard that, like, Joyce was like tuning a shortwave radio and just taking inspiration from, among other things, there. But the thing that interested me most was in the guy that wrote the Northrop Frye McLuhan book, Bruce Powell. There's a footnote that mentions Bob Dobbs, which, you know, we don't have to talk about Bob, but everyone should know. You got Cameron McEwen is kind of like the university sourced. He's not an academic, but academics understand him because he presents all his information through the same academic sort of like infrastructure as they do. Like, it's in journals. And
he uses their vernacular or whatever.
Yeah, it's almost like Cameron McEwen, for the uninitiated, is more like Elsie, and Bob is more like Marshall's dad, Herbert. Bob is obviously more on the oral discourse dialogue side. And if you do the research of what Bob says, almost all the time, the references he says are in fact real. You'll find the quote that he talked about casually in conversation where you think he's maybe making it up or like getting it wrong, but it's actually right. Like, it's because of Bob that I knew that Marshall had a relative named Annie whose last name was Hall. But he just mentions that, like, kind of like we're talking now. But he has all the references, and Bob actually has a lot of the correspondence that someone got a copy of the correspondence in a collection, and Bob's got a lot of photos. Bob is as much a scholar as anybody else, but because he knows that, he doesn't have to play by the sort of RSVP literate linear way. And Cameron doesn't either. His McLuhan New Sciences is the only one that talks about the impact of Winnipeg outside of me. But he does it through getting the papers of the professors that taught McLuhan and what they talked about. Like, you know, like Rupert Lodge taught McLuhan at U of M. He would mention Whitehead, and that may have been McLuhan's.
That's my brother's last name.
Oh, okay. Well, that may have been Alfred North Whitehead. And I only know whatever I know because of doing all the research I've done with all the videos. It sunk in a lot of the quotes anyway. And Alfred North Whitehead said the greatest discovery of the 19th century was the discovery of the technique of discovery.
Right.
But it's like the discovery of invention.
And then
a synonym for discovery.
Edgar Allan Poe, he talked about start with the effect. Then
start at the end, what you want the end effect to be, and move back from there.
Yeah.
And that's Descent into the Maelstrom, which is essentially the story of the spinning top, where if you can become detached from your environment to observe your environment, you know, like tapping your head and rubbing your stomach while walking.
Suspended judgment. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you can notice the patterns in the information overload rather than try and give the same technique of discovery to each and every detail as you're discovering. You can't be human scale in a network environment of the internet. So all you can really notice is patterns. That's why, you know, when people talk about Joe Rogan, whatever, I don't care about like Joe Rogan, positive or negative, service or disservice. What I do know is that he's doing video. So video is going to have more information than a tweet. Just like, you know, I'm speaking, you can write it down. So, okay, so you have speaking, that's audio, writing down, that's print, and then video can absorb speaking and print. Video is the last medium. Even if it's holographic, even if it's metaverse, it's the last motion replay. McLuhan would say, like, writing allowed you to say, would you mind repeating that? And that was like the beginning of the first instant replay. He says this on the End of Polite Society to Malcolm Muggeridge, where Malcolm Muggeridge is basically just being what everyone's saying, downplaying the effects of new technology. And he says, it's like Socrates was a product. McLuhan goes, Socrates was a product of new technology because writing was invented in Greece. The phonetic alphabet reached its zenith stage. It started with the Phoenician traders, let's say in the 1800 BC. They wanted to start classifying their wares to sell them. Mm-hmm. And then by the time it gets to Greece and before it gets to England, in Greece, it becomes writing. And you can now say, would you mind repeating that? You didn't have to go with Homer and come up with a song and dance and a rhyming poem to repeat it. You could just repeat it.
Yeah.
Without having to be like, dim the lights and be like, and now I'm going to repeat it. You know what I mean? It was just like StreamYard.com. Right. Like it's like I could take a screenshot and then I'll be like, okay, here's the screenshot. That's what I saw. I feel like, okay, so the rounded.
Oh, yeah. What did you see? Yeah.
Like all that.
What did you say? This is what I said. Copy and paste.
Exactly. And then we have to deal with the effects of that, which is where, oh, fuck. We don't have a precedent for dealing with that instantaneous reality. And that's what we're getting is like, oh, I want this. Okay, well, here it is. To the definition of what you think you meant when you said it. And it's like, and if you keep not paying attention, it's going to be the point where you have not just one implant in your head. It'll be like Futurama with your head, and a copy of you. And your head's basically a remote or whatever you can think of. That's what happens if it's like, oh, it's not good enough. I want to be lazier.
Did you ever see that? There was this animated movie I saw when I was like, I don't know, 9 years old. And it was like, If Every Day Was Christmas. You ever seen that one?
No,
and
but I get it already.
Yeah. Every day is Christmas. She's like, I wish Christmas was every day. And then it's like, well, your wish has been, made. Right. And then every day she gets the same thing: a dog,
it's Groundhog
train.
Day. It's basically like
I haven't seen that only it continues to build off of itself. So in the end, she's got like 150 dogs, and she's like,
right. Well, it's like so it's I started buying DVDs.
Yeah,
Blu-rays. Yeah. Well, what happens? Or books or any physical media?
People are like, hey, people collect these things. Why don't we
just gotta put them somewhere.
Library?
You got to put them somewhere. And then it's like, okay, well, where am I going to get the money for that? It's like we're in a situation. It was so whimsical when I acquired it. Now I have to actually place it somewhere. Oh, my goodness. I feel like an adult. So it's this kind of like, I don't blame the person for acquiring it. But the accountability comes when you realize what's the effect of acquiring it. It's very simple. And then the challenge is, are you going to be honest with dealing with the effect, or are you going to lie? Do you know what I mean? It begins there. It's like, what do I do? Fucking be accountable. It's the easiest way. If you want to lie and it works for you, you can get away with it, but then you have massive attack where it's like 100th window. You might get away with it 99 times. Yes. Yeah, but if you don't get away with it the 100th time, you're back at zero.
Well, it's like that football player. I can't remember his name right now because my brain is a bit scrambled. But he was this big hotshot football player who played for the New England Patriots, and he did some petty crime. He murdered somebody over like nothing, right?
Okay.
NFL player. Millions of dollars. But the backstory is that he kept getting away with things in his life that he just thought he was untouchable. And then eventually all the cards came tumbling down. And it's like my saying is, the less responsibilities you take, the more lies you'll tell.
Yes, that's a good one.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh no, blah blah blah. You'll just keep shirking things off.
I couldn't agree more with that, Rob Grant, for real. No, the less responsibilities you take, the more accountable you'll be.
The less responsibility you take, the less responsibilities you take, the more lies you'll tell.
Right. And the lies will get you.
Yeah. It just,
Like-
it's like, I never understood the expression. You can't sweep it under the rug because sooner or later your rug's going to be sticking. It's going to be 6 feet high off the ground because there's so much shit underneath it.
That's the whole rug pull thing in crypto, where you like, if you don't do the right information, you just give money to something that's like got a picture of a funny dog on it. And then all of a sudden one day, all that, cause you think you're going to get like, it's at 0.0000006 years later, 0005. And you're like, if it can only go to 0.00006 years later, 15, I'll be a trillionaire.
Allegedly, Jerry Garcia's last words were, Netscape opened at what? The lead singer of the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
Netscape in the 90s. I think.
Yeah. Mark Andreessen.
Yeah, it opened at like $400 or something on the NASDAQ or something. And Jerry Garcia was like, it opened at what? And then had a heart attack later on that day and died.
Well, I mean, the Grateful Dead, again, I know the song Dark Star. That's it.
I don't know
and
very
I know
much.
like the video for I Will Survive. Like good stuff. Yeah. And like, riding that train high on cocaine or whatever. Keep on trucking in the Robert Crumb thing. And you can reveal that with editing. It's like that movie Run Lola Run, where you go by people and you get like little Polaroid snapshots of their entire existence really quickly. Okay, so that's kind of become shorthand in our world with memes, which are just kind of like static versions, and they're not very. You'll have meme open mics in the metaverse, guaranteed, just because of all the alliterations. Anyway. And you'll be able to tip them and do little snaps, and it'll be like little Doge coins.
And sorry to interrupt one more time, but Richard Dawkins, do you know his definition of meme? Because he came up with the term, I believe.
Well, McLuhan uses it.
Okay.
Before the Dawkins book, which I think is in the 70s. Dawkins was also in Wired. That's where I first heard of meme. I have like the issue of Wired is in one of the videos. But I mean, McLuhan says, like, he's talking about Chubby Checkers, the twist. And he says, I think, when people come home, they like to unwind in this mimetic pattern. And he just looked at it as like, what, a replicatable pattern that infects like a virus kind of thing. Dawkins? Right. Is that what Dawkins describes?
He said, Richard, sorry, and I was just checking it out because Richard Dawkins coined the word meme in 1976 bestseller, The Selfish Gene. Within the piece, Dawkins explains how an internet meme is a hijacking of the original idea, and that instead of mutating by random change and spreading by a form of Darwinian selection, they are altered deliberately by human creation.
Right. I mean, they don't, like, someone's not.
So it's almost like, Ben or Skinner, the behavioralist guy.
Yeah, Skinner.
Behavioralist. And he's like, this is how animals react. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You have the thing in the cage.
Yeah. Well,
obviously it's going to act in a weird way, like
McLuhan
we are altering things. Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
well, he says like McLuhan's got a joke about him where it's like Skinner was studying grasshoppers one day and he took one leg off the grasshopper and then, went back the next day and took off another leg.
Yeah.
And then eventually took off all the legs and concluded that, when you take off all the legs of a grasshopper, it can't hear. Where it's just kind of like unrelated, where it's like you're telling it to do something, but of course it has no legs. Ignoring that and saying that it can't hear you tell it to do it. But
the forest for the trees, but we're in a cave. I can't see the forest for the trees. Dude, you're in a fucking cave. Get out of it. Oh, okay. Yeah. I see the forest now.
Yeah. I mean, like it's like you wonder, is it strategy or stupidity in a sphere of uncertainty? You know what I mean? Where it's like there's no seams to see what is happening, but either you're trying to come across wrong on purpose, or you're an idiot. And idiot means private person in Greek. That's just an aside. But it's like with memes, like there's no way he used the word internet in his book.
No,
right?
I don't think that's right.
Yeah,
I think that's bullshit off the actual definition is in another book. So,
well, I mean, like I can link it to you later, but like, I have him saying mimetic because obviously it's significant for McLuhan to say the word, to have video of McLuhan saying the word mimetic or meme, a mimetic pattern. I mean, it's a pattern.
And that's
the
a pattern.
gene.
It copies itself, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the
Yeah.
DNA sequence, it's all just patterns.
Yeah.
But
And we're constantly just building off of each other's inventions.
yes. Well, as Kirk Hammett would say, to imitate is to create. But and even Paul Schaefer was talking about the Guess Who. Paul Schaefer's from Thunder Bay, Guess Who, obviously from Winnipeg. And he's like, when the Guess Who would come through Thunder Bay on their way home to Winnipeg, before they had any like originals like American Woman or These Eyes, they would do amazing covers. And Paul Schaefer was like, you know, it made me think maybe the highest form a band can really ever do is be a cover band. Because either you're doing originals to kind of avoid all the things of like legal things and, you know, all the ire of a crowd, perhaps, if that's important to you. But if you're just covering, then, you know, like you could be like staying true to the original and adding to it. And look at who's talking about this. A guy who his entire career on Letterman was really just doing bare bones cover interpretations. Like if you ever hear the World's Dangerous Band, as they were called, do Green Onions by Booker T, this guy Don Giller has the best YouTube channel, and it's endorsed by Letterman. They even mentioned him on one of the top 10s once when it was still on. He's got every single Letterman from his entire career. So you got the band from 82 to like 2015 doing Green Onions. He did like one long 19-minute clip of all the different times they did Green Onions. And it's like, you know, it's amazing, but it just goes to show, like, you know, that kind of like, you know, imitation and flattery elements. But, you know, I'm kind of, my insights are getting a little more clipped, and I still am liking talking, but I'm just like kind of where I was at the beginning, where it's like, I don't want to forget a couple things. McLuhan thought he saw his name in Finnegan's Wake. Do you know that story?
No.
Okay. On page 254, sentence 3 of Finnegan's Wake, it's going to say, Mirichel McMuin, Ipstaden, product of the extremes, given quotidians to our means. But I think it goes Orion of the Orgiasts, Mirichel McMuin, Ipstaden, product of the extremes, giving quotidians to our means. And then it says a bunch of other stuff. But that reference was in Bruce Powell's book as a footnote. You know,
you said 254?
254 of any version you have of Finnegan's Wake, sentence 3.
Okay. Oh, sentence 3. Oh shit.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
these
yeah.
are long sentences. So the mar of murmury murmurs. I don't know if you can see this. Hold on. 254.
250. Okay, go to the top.
Okay.
Stop. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's after the word by Ruri, but it says Thoth and Cleaver, the Stouts, Swinehearts. Okay, so read from Orion. You'll see it, third sentence, middle of the page. Middle of the third sentence, it says Orion.
I see Orlan.
No, that's Orion. And that's hilarious. They either made a printing mistake, because it's supposed to read Orion. Is that an L?
This book is wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong. That's hilarious.
It's wrong.
Well, I mean, it's wrong in every single version of that book. But if you read it, it'll say Orion of the Orgiasts.
Yeah.
And then it'll say Mirichel McMuin.
Oh, McMuin.
So go back to it for a sec.
Okay.
Because I mean, that's
this version.
It's a new version, I bet.
Yeah, 2021.
Unfucking believable. But
isn't that wild though?
It completely makes sense. That's cosmic meta narratives, that there would be a typo in Finnegan's Wake, a book that has no correctly spelled words, more so than it has correct spelled words.
So Orlan.
It says Orlan of the Orgiasts.
Yeah.
And then it goes right after Orgiasts. It says Mirichel.
Mirichel McMuin.
Yeah, exactly. Mirichel McMuin, Ipstaden, product of the extremes.
Yeah.
So Mirichel McMuin in McLuhan's copies of Finnegan's Wake, and I'm still processing the fact that it says Orlan. In McLuhan's copies of Finnegan's Wake, he writes on the side, and I have it. I went to Toronto to Fisher Library, February 2016, after a much sort of endeavor to get the funds to figure out why to get it, to do it, all those boxes without, like it wasn't easy to figure this out, but I figured it out with some help from MTS. I'll get into that in a second. It's not that interesting. Long story short, the local internet television provider needs to have 2% local content because of the Canadian content rules. So they have a stories from home segment, which you're not going to believe what it's about. It's about stories in Manitoba about Manitobans.
Right.
I'll let that sink in for a little bit. Anyway, so
story about Manitoba in Manitoba about Manitobans.
Local content. Shockingly, no one had ever done one on McLuhan because they'd never heard of him. That's a lie, but they never did one. Because most people think he's born in Toronto or from Toronto.
Yeah.
Most people in Winnipeg don't know.
Because he was such an academic icon.
Well, he worked there from like 46 till 1980 or 79 when he was asked to leave. Anyway, they hated him while he was alive, and even a little bit after he died. But they realized they could make money. I'm sure they're all nice people. Anyway.
But he definitely was an iconoclast.
Well, because he wasn't understood by most in the first place, then he got famous and that didn't change. So it's like, they're going to be like, what do you think? You're so famous. It's like a dog hearing a joke is what most people react when they hear me talk. How are you going to feel after an entire lifetime? Anyway, so it's like, and that's why it's interesting. Like, I feel like not like him, but like, had he stayed here, he would have not, it wouldn't have been the worst, but it would have been like how we all feel. It's like, we get it. We are born here. Anyways, it's like, it's fine. It's great. Everyone's a genius. It's like in the social network where it's like, yeah, no one's impressed at Harvard by other people who make a lot of money. So it's like no one's impressed in Winnipeg by another person in Winnipeg who's like really artistically inclined and actually good. It's like throw a rock. The Guess Who. I mean, like there's so many things that have come out here culturally. I mean, without Winnipeg, there'd be no Alan Bly or David Steinberg. Without Alan Bly or David Steinberg, there's no Smothers Brothers. There's no modern comedy. There's no SCTV. There's no Lorne Michaels. There's no I mean, it's just like the guy who started Priority Records from Winnipeg. So without Priority Records, there's no Eminem. There's no Eminem without Priority Records.
Oh, shit.
So I'm saying Winnipeg's just a cork or drain. It's just because it's in the middle. It has nothing to do with it other than we're in the middle of North America. North America is like the new world. So you have this resonance that's just constantly, it's a landlocked Bermuda Triangle. And so you have all this cultural stuff that people just constantly expressing themselves. It's not to say that there aren't geniuses all over the world. It's just the high concentration of them.
Has nothing to do with Louis Riel or something like that.
It's North America. It's like the coffee break of Earth. That's Winnipeg. The coffee break is when you're having your smoke, reflecting on your lot in life. And when you look to your side and someone else is having a smoke, there's that gestural communication. And then maybe you say, like, talk about the weather, insult your boss, say that woman is attractive, whatever it is that gets you through the moment. Finish your smoke, think you should quit, whatever. That's Winnipeg. A coffee break of the world. For 15 minutes if you're lucky. Probably less now because you'll be on your phone. And then your implant and then blah, blah, blah. In your mind. Matrix will be like something you wished for with how much worse it's going to get if people don't smarten up. Anyways, and I don't have a prescription on how to other than accountability. 254 sentence 3 on the thing from Bruce Powell. Bob is mentioned in a footnote saying that the rumor is that there's a mention of McLuhan saying me, and then that's why. So he goes me from Michelle McMuhan, Moonchild. That's not in the book. That's just what he writes down in his copies that he thinks refers to him. Me, Michelle McMuhan, Moonchild, Orion of the Orgiast. Why Moonchild? Because he's born on July 21st. Which is apparently
wasn't that one of Frank Zappa's children's names, Moonchild?
Moon Unit.
Moon Unit.
No, the weird thing about July 21st and McLuhan saying Moonchild is that the first moon landing was July 21st, 1969. The study that led up to understanding media was called Project 69. And McLuhan died when he was 69. he had a quote saying, if you want to understand the structure or get a good image structure of any book, go to page 69 or 96. His wife passes away when she's 96. If that's not cosmic meta narrative, I don't know what is. And his friend, John Culkin, who came up with We Shape Our Tools and Thereafter Our Tools Shape Us, lived on, I forget the name of the street, but the address was 69. And Andrew posted a picture of the envelope. That's how I know. But it's like, you know, that's really, oh, and his office was like 96 something at the U of T before it became the Cultural Center for Technology, Culture and Technology. Before he moved there, the coach house, his address was like 96 something at U of T. So the fact that he references Orion connects it to Moonchild, and what's the space, the humans going back to space in 2024. Do you know what that project is called? Project Orion. What is there a Marshall Space Center? Yes, there is. So it's like,
isn't that the name of the NASA headquarters in?
Could be. I'm not
Marshall?
a good researcher. I'm just like a specialist researcher in that 69, 96, and then I just mentioned all those inventories we could play back and have them. That's at least 7. So
yeah. Yeah. So do you think that the world, like ecosystems, have you ever seen the movie Burn After Reading?
I have the DVD.
Coen brother. I don't mean to spoil it, but at the end, the guy's like, are you just trying to tell me that this whole thing is just a clusterfuck? Like, because it's like all these events, but there's no connection, but they think that there is. Yes, and therefore a movie is created. But at the end, the guy's like, you're trying to tell me that none of this has any connection. And the guy's like, that's exactly what I'm saying.
That guy that says that, the guy that says there's no connection, I just put him in my Instagram stories a couple days ago because he was in an 80s show called Sledgehammer. Okay, I forget his name. And I remember that part. And I think Bob has even referenced that movie. And it's like the Coen brothers,
Dobbs.
obviously. Yeah, Bob Dobbs. And Coen brothers, obviously amazing. Also from like Minnesota. My favorite movie of them became A Serious Man because it's just so like identifiable to me. But obviously Raising Arizona. I know their stuff really well. And so Lady Killers, Burn After Reading, they're all worth seeing. But it's just kind of like they're not, you know what I mean? If you're like hoping for the next Raising Arizona, you see it and you're like let down, you know what I mean? But I have it. I do have the retail of Burn After Reading. So like, yeah, I mean, well, that what you just said that he said, say we see connections, or are they there? Are they not there?
Yeah, exactly.
That's that whole probability patterns of subatoms.
The
Heisenberg thing.
Whether they're connected or not doesn't necessarily matter.
Well, the uncertainty principle, from what my lay understanding is, the observer can affect the mass of what's observed.
That's right. If you're looking at the particle, then it becomes a particle or an array.
So if these sort of like slanderous, literate notions, and that could be anything that's when the acoustic bumps into the visual, you get icon, and those are letters. Yeah. And into words and occasionally hieroglyphs. I mean, nobody thinks about the shape of the number 2. Nobody thinks about the shape of an A, but they could. But compared to a hieroglyph, which is sort of like a snapshot of a process, whereas letters, phonetic alphabet is just the phonetic alphabet.
Yes.
But if you want to truly get abstract, and it is abstract, I'm sure that they're at another perspective, microscopic perhaps, that the letters of the alphabet could in fact be processes, but that's so abstract to begin to think about. But that's where we're heading, because where is human scale in this environment? It must be there, but it's probably visualizing something that's so psychically unconscious and previously acoustic only that its visual representation would have no precedent for us to identify without having several generations. Like, you think about it, the printing press came out in late 1400s. That's like a few centuries of us getting used to it on an intuitive physical level, like that William book you mentioned, and that the book that I mentioned, which I didn't mention the name, but it's in the beginning of Man and Media, which I use at the beginning of the movie that I have called Western Cynical. which is the York presentation in 1975, where the idea is that our instincts mean nothing in a human created environment. Our instincts are only for a natural environment. So for us to identify the human scale inside the imploded world of network communications, we're not going to see it probably for a few hundred years. Maybe less.
Mass literacy didn't really happen until the early 20th century.
Okay.
Right?
So, and now apply. Post-literacy goes a lot faster because it's got both acoustic, oral, and written literate at the same time.
And that's straight to your limbic system. Anytime you have the auditory and the visual, that's straight to your limbic. But when you have to read, you're processing, right? You're like, video, right? Like,
right.
There's phonetic reading, and then there's
and so so it's like we're beginning to visualize elements of the interval. That's really all the extensions of technology are doing, is visualizing what was previously only acoustic. So on that level, it's happening, but I think it's at such a delicate level. The young people who are experiencing it initially, it's like a baby can't write. It can only imitate what the spoken words it can only imitate its environment through speech. It's not going to immediately start to read. Now, someone say, oh, well, my baby read and it's going to be because you probably had your iPad or a touch screen around, and it saw that if it touched that screen, it made a thing, and it did that.
Yeah. That's conditioning.
And then you were like tired at work that day and thought, my baby's a genius. It's like, your baby's a baby. Yeah. Your baby's human. And we still don't know what that is. So, and we never will. That's the interval. So it's like, and that's the scary part of faith and the present stuff is like, because if it wasn't there'd be no nail here and there'd be no nail here. It's like if my hand is not, I'm holding the steering wheel. My hand is not part of the steering wheel.
Yes.
The steering wheel is not part of my hand, because that wouldn't be a hand, nor would it be a steering wheel. So
the best example of that is the Hulk, when the guy could actually touch, like he could actually meld with something. Like that, even in a car crash, the things are never touching.
Right. And that's the thing, is like our addiction to classification sort of blinds us to what we're classifying, because it's coming, it's coming right to us. We're blinded by the lights. And it's like, when you watch a movie on TV or on your phone, that's light through. You become a screen, then a viewer. When you go to the movie theater and it's on a screen, the screen's the screen. And that's why it's a hot medium in the theater, because you are going directly into the screen. You're not the screen. The light coming from the phone makes you what's being projected onto.
Yeah. Because you control whatever it is you're looking at on your phone. But you go to see a movie, the only thing you control is the choice of the film that you see.
Right. But once you're in that darkened theater, you have no control. It's a unique experience. You're not there. You're just, it's you. That's you, directly only you. But when this is got light onto me, I'm a screen right now. It's projecting onto me. Yeah. And I have to secondarily process that. It may only take it's happening at light speed, but thought being faster than light, that's the latency, is the speed of thought compared to the speed of light. I mean, you're not even able to think about the concept of the speed of light if you weren't thinking about what it meant. Therefore, thinking has to be faster. So fuck it.
But is there a collective element to that too? Like, if we're all like it, the faster things speed up, like hot mediums and things like that, the more that we're into things, like you said, 18,000 years. Jesus. That will
so what's the pattern? The pattern is cleavage, pets, babies.
Yes.
I mean, like, that is, so that helps. That helps navigate, but it's still like, that's why people like religion. The book is there. It's comforting. We all love books.
Yeah. It gives us some meridians. It gives us some meridians. You know, I was just
You
thinking,
can survive a nuclear war. There'll always be books. If you're around, there's going to be a book. And as long as there's a book, you can use this to project, to fill in the acoustic elements of the unconscious and your feelings into that visual space that's being described to you, that you're in constant dialogue with while reading silently. You know, like that sound of silence of your mind reading is, we began misunderstanding from that point. Gloriously misunderstanding, but you know, the etymology apparently of the word read is to guess. So we're it's a wonderful booby trap, this existence. Not necessarily in a bad way either. I mean, like, you know,
it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, you do what you do what you can. I mean, try to make it better than you found it.
Mm.
You know, I don't. And you know what's going on right now? Everybody wants to have their 15 seconds of fame. You know, everybody wants it because once
Andy
they get
Warhol,
it, then they have to deal with, like, you know, the responsibility of an audience and having handlers and don't talk about that anymore, or you won't get this money from that company. All that stuff becomes a thing, and then back to crypto again, which isn't really that complicated. There's going to be more video games. People will spend cryptocurrencies. They'll buy things in that environment, three-dimensional environment. This was all already done with something called Second Life in the early 2000s.
Which still exists.
Right. So, I mean, it's just like, you know.
And is that an affair?
Yes. I mean, like, it's an affair. I mean, without even knowing what you're talking about, but knowing what you're talking about, anything like that is obvious. You know it when it happens.
But in many ways, like, forget about what I mean, but like, you could be cheating on your life or on your spouse by just living this alternate. But is that really you lifestyle?
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's like understanding what this extension is. You know, like, we're talking right now in the environment of StreamYard, which will be on YouTube. Will people see it? Probably 18 people. So it's like, and that's not the point. The point is you and I are talking about McLuhan, and we're talking about what we're talking about. And that's the real point, is that the importance of having these conversations help us, because Marshall McLuhan say, like, you know, all my best discoveries come from conversations. And I mean, we've had some good ones, like some good insights in this, you know, what we're at, like, where are we at?
42.
Oh yeah, 142.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, and it's gone by quick.
Yeah, definitely.
And it'll eventually, there'll be an open transcript that will be able to command or control find certain words that maybe the thing will get right, you know. And to me, like, the most important thing is leveraging the timeline. That, like, I have so many, like, I've tried to do that as a person of one without any, like, specialist skill, to come up with software to be able to leverage the timeline so that you don't even have to watch the video. You can scan through the timeline, see what it's about, and start at the point of your interest. And we'll get there. Hopefully I'm a part of it, but if I'm not, I'm not. We'll get there inevitably anyways. Yeah. But, like,
some people do that already through direct intentional editing, but you're almost saying something unintended, like, this is just, it does it for you.
Well, there's like, you know, there's only so much knowledge. Like, you're going to know what's on your bookshelf. All I know is that there's books. You're going to know where you bought your bookshelf. All I know is that it's made out of wood. So it's like, there's going to be, like, you know, the morality and the metadata, I call it, where it's like the metadata, every single thing every figure is an ad, whether it's a shelf, whether it's the paint on your wall. What is my jacket? Should I, you know, have an advertisement for, like, you know, some razor company, you know what I mean? Like, all these things, that's how people are going to make money in the future. You know, and it's not even going to need the metaverse. The metaverse will help because each insight could be an NFT, and you won't have to go through the minting process and have Ethereum fees and have, like, oh yeah, I wanted to put, like, you know, he should have Gillette products here for grooming because, you know, he's got a beard, so he should shave it off. And then if anybody sees this video and sees that thing, it's like, you know, a coupon, and then they get a discount on the thing, and whoever did the index, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on and on.
And it's already happening with influencers, you know, use my
but that's so, like, the old sort of
yes,
old technology being the content, the old thing being the content of the new technology.
Influencers are like the new Clint Eastwood movies. Like they're the Don Quixote of our time. Like they're just like they're out of time.
The only thing you got to explain this to me, because I mean Don Quixote tilting windmills, and Don Quixote being like, you know, a man of the medieval time, being confronted with the printing press.
Have you ever read this book, Things Fall Apart?
No, but I mean, I totally believe that.
Well, it opens with a quote from W.B. Yeats, and I'm not super into poetry, but I'll read this to you because it's a great line. And then
let me guess, is the quote this? The dream world is no longer, the reality is no longer visible, and the dream world is no longer invisible, kind of thing.
It's from that the Second Coming, right?
All I know is that's Arthur Symons, and it's attributed to Yeats a lot.
Well,
so what's the quote?
This opening, it says, turning and turning in the widening gyre. I don't know if I said that word right. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. And what this book is about is this guy, he's so macho and he's so much about his culture, and he never wants to be presumed as weak. But then, I'm not there yet, but things happen that you realize his virtues are his downfall. What's that word for it again? Not narcissism, but
pride.
It's a word for pride, but it's like because of your pride, that's your downfall. I can't even think.
Yeah, like, well, you know, like, I hear what you're saying. Like, I mean, like, you know, and I get it. I get that, and that's the thing. Adaptability is something that's almost like it's impossible for all of us to be as adaptive as we know we should be, because sooner or later we become foreign to ourselves. That's the whole, like, you know, having your identity. That's why I feel kind of, you know, bad, because I don't know, like, the teachers don't do it, and I don't blame them. Not because it's not that I don't blame them, but it's like nobody seems to realize, like, the ramifications of cultivating an identity online requires a lot of offline understanding in order to be able to move at a pace online, you know, that is feasible for that environment. And a lot of times people are just running the mouth, hiding out behind being anonymous, all of the sort of negative things, that momentary saturnalia, or those like explosive moments that people want to delete what they said or this or that, where it's just like, you know, we have to meditate and understand, not meditate, but meditate on the environment that we're using, because we're using it. So you should understand what you're doing and how it's affecting you. And a lot of these people, I call them digital feral children. And the forest is the network. And they're growing up alone in this environment without parents, raised by the internet. And the internet's the big wolf. Now, the wolf in the internet, there are good people, but there's like more confusion than there is sense. And that's a characteristic that's to be understood. That's like going outside, but now the outside's inside. And these fundamental things, people don't think about what happens when the characteristics of those simple things are something that you have to consider when operating inside these things. You know, like, it's just, you gotta be aware. Like, and so the only way you're aware is, well, what are you aware of? So you gotta do some diligence and understand what you're in.
Well, I imagine if the world knew you, but you didn't know yourself. I go back to Justin Bieber. The world knows you, but you don't know yourself. Like, that is,
it's a mind blower. But I think, like, that's why.
How can you recover from that?
Well, and I think he is. I mean, like, I
don't mean to use. He's such an easy example to use.
Think about it. Think about it, though. It's not hard, because we're so inundated with it. We know he was young. We know he became popular. We know he had some song, and someone figured out a way to stretch it out 800%, so it sounded like an ambient song by Boards of Canada. So that's how I knew that he had a song called, I think it was imaginatively titled Girl. And so So it's like, okay, so he had a song. I don't know how it sounds in how he made it, but I know how it sounds when it's 800% slower. And yeah, Sigur Rós or Sigur Rós mixed with Boards of Canada, Aphex Twin, blah, blah, blah. Could have been on Warp Records or whatever, Planet Mu. Anyway, then you have the thing where it's like Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber with their like mug shots, which is a rite of passage when you're like famous in Hollywood. And people had it on shirts. Other influencers had it on a shirt, you know, and that would be like, you know, in some casual situation in their life on Instagram, they'd be wearing that, or Miley Cyrus would be wearing it, and it would have her and Justin Bieber in their mugshots on a shirt that she's wearing herself. And then, of course, her dad was in a David Lynch movie, Mulholland Drive. Anyway, talk about David Lynch in a sec. But then he has this kind of like downfall, Justin Bieber, where it's like, you know, eventually, you know, you can't have your favorite meal every day. You can't have Christmas every day. And in this case, you can't have your favorite social libations every day. And then he finds religion. And that kind of straightens him out for a while. And then now he's got this promotion with, you know, Tim Hortons. So it's like, okay, well, it seems like he recognizes that you can't live like you know, like you're at like some Roman orgy every single second of your existence. It's like, you know, you can't have you can't have telescopes.
You can't drink beer and eat cake every day.
You can't parallel park with like telescopes coming out of your eyes. It's difficult. It's gonna even, you know, maybe if you have a driverless car, but then you're beta testing. So it's like blah blah blah. He eventually caught up to where the world's projection of him was and found that thing. And guys like him should probably eventually, they should probably teach in university communications. Kim Kardashian should, Kanye should, but they have to obviously want to, because I think, hold on, the students would listen because they know. It's like with people. You know that NFT artist or that artist named Beeple?
No.
Okay, well, Beeple, Beeple. He's a guy that uses Cinema 4D, which is a 3D rendering program, and he has a workflow where he could get models and create collages inside Cinema 4D. And so he would do this series, and still does it, where every day he does something, and by the time it hits midnight, he might start at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. By the time, and I know this, he was on Joe Rogan, but I'd used this stuff like in 2011, 2010, because everybody that knows who Beeple is knew who Beeple was for at least 10 years, because he would give his stuff out for free. You didn't have to give him attribution. And that was genius, because eventually he made such good stuff, everyone used it. And the word of mouth was, well, you could spot his work, even if no one told you it was his work. So when he broke a record for selling a mosaic of the 14 years of every days he did for $69 million as an NFT, really high resolution, when that happened, granted, you know, the art world is crazy. It was crazy before Beeple, but if it was going to happen to anyone, it made the most sense that it happened to him, because everyone was already familiar with him. So if Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus, Lindsay Lohan, Kanye West,
these are household names.
These people have to go into education. They have to go into it. It's not like, oh,
they're the only people that could probably save it.
Well, the reason why they have to is because they will have to sort of withstand the first test of like the sycophants going, isn't it great? And the sycophants in the media, like basically like, you know, making stories out of it. But like, instead of it being like Donald Trump, you know, where it's like, this guy's an idiot, he can't win. And then he wins. And they're like, fuck, you know? So it's like for them, be like, oh, it makes like what we're doing now. It's like it makes so much sense. Professor West, you know what I mean? They'll all be like Professor West and think it's the most charming fucking thing in the world. And we can't get mad because all of a sudden they're all like children too, and you don't want them to fucking cry. But anyways, it's just like, but it'll help the world. It would help the world if they got into it to explain what McLuhan would say. And he'd say this: if we had any consciousness at all, we would teach our children how to handle the effects of media and advertising fallout. And that's why that quote that circulates online about World War III will be a guerrilla information age with no difference between military and civilian participation. Page 66, Culture's Our Business. I could be a teacher, but because I have no bona fide or providence, people be like, you're just kind of an asshole. And I couldn't argue with them, but it's like, right. But once we get over that and you realize I'm not out to hurt you, I'm just here to talk about McLuhan because you're not going to. You're going to be the guy in line that doesn't even misunderstand him correctly and only gravitates to the stuff other people are talking about, which is going to be that scene from Annie Hall. So you're doing more disservice than service.
Well, confirmation bias, right?
Well, somebody's got to do the actual work where it's like what you said. How do you understand who you are if you've developed in this world of the internet all the time, but you're living your life. You're not like going back and rewinding every single thing that everybody's there, like it's this composite definition of you because you're out there. And it's like, we're all out there now. And so that's what the sort of universal element is like, well, how do we deal with this? Well, the best people to ask would be people that have dealt with it. And it just
their lives.
Those people happen to be celebrities or what we call celebrities, but really they're students. These are people that are out there doing the work for us.
They're patient zero.
Yeah. And that's, so it's like, it has nothing to do with their art. It's got to do with how did they survive, and that's the thing. Being alive is cool. Guns N' Roses, like before they got back together, or the Eagles, or any of these reunion things, people are like, oh, they're in it for the money. But you know what? At least they're alive doing it. Now, if they're embarrassing themselves, that's another story. But I thought you were in Los Angeles for some reason, I guess because of Jerry. But I went to Los Angeles to see Mr. Bungle, and it was amazing. And I just saw that 40th anniversary of Metallica on Amazon, and Lars Ulrich finally plays drums good. He plays better now than he's ever played. And people would make fun of him. People would be like, really make fun of him in an evil way at times, but also be like, you suck. And like if other drummers kind of substituted in because he was sick, be like, oh, Metallica's amazing. But like, he's finally good. I don't like a lot of the new stuff. I really only like the And Justice for All album, but like, and that was a great album and he was good there for a moment. And for like, but once the Black album came out, it's like the double bass stopped. And whenever they tried to do it, it was never good. And it was just so like, it's like you're on the highway going 110 and all of a sudden you're going 60 and it feels like you're, parked. And that's what it felt like to listen. It was like, I'm parked. You suck. And it's like, you wouldn't listen for like 5 years, but then listens and is like, inspiring because they're like senior citizens, but it's good.
Right.
It's like unquestionably good for what it is.
And it's almost like they're in it. Like there comes a point when it's like, we can't be in it for the women and the yachts. No. It's like, fuck, we got all that stuff.
What McLuhan say, he'd be like, you need art to survive. Because back to Descent into the Maelstrom, the two brothers are fishing. The tornado happens. One brother drowns. The other brother is shocked and through that shock detached. And he's noticing the patterns. And an artist sees a pattern in life and tries to render it. So we're all trying to notice these patterns just to be able to ride out this storm to get back to some sort of understanding through the information overload. And, collectively, yeah, that's all we can do. No matter what comes at us, what we know is that we're at least able to do this. And maybe one day we'll be able to like have conversations in face-to-face at human scale, but they won't be like this conversation exactly. There's always going to be the, minutia of difference based on the technology that you're using, whether it's in person or whether it's through StreamYard, Zoom, or whatever the network facilitation is. The network facilitation is an extension of our senses. So the man-made environment is still made out of humans. Humans make it. Women are the most innovative. If you go into we don't know their names, but I mean, Ada Lovelace, I think was the first programmer. That's the token from Cardano is called Ada. And there's this other lady who was on Letterman, and she was the one that came up with the phrase, ask for forgiveness, not permission. Now, as a joke, I live with a bunch of women. It's like, that's such a woman thing. But at the same time, it's like brilliant. And that's how it goes, like that. So I'm not trying to win points, but it's like humans and women specifically know that they're the ones that have come up with a lot of the core ideas, and we're going to go out and make a lot of them happen, like the grunt work. They inspire us to do the grunt work, just like they always did with Cave Times. They're out there having the kid, cooking the food. We're out there getting the food. They probably give us better tips on finding the food. They're the ones gutting the fish.
Right.
So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's like that there are roles, but now everybody kind of sees the uniform placebo, this notion of where it seems like everything's uniform because we're all on TV. So you have this like instant empathy, but it's an empathy to a fault because it's not real empathy. You're just looking at pixels. You're not realizing that's what you're doing, but you're building off that. And that's where McLuhan comes in again. It's like, look at the ground. Don't look at the figure. You know, the forest of the trees thing. If, you know, you're just reacting to the coagulation of pixels, but you're not thinking about the fact that they're pixels. The pixels have no morality.
Words backwards, swords.
I just read that this morning.
Yeah.
And
I didn't come up with that.
Mythos.
I obviously did
Mythos.
Yeah.
Mythos. The word in Greek or Latin, but the word in Greek is mythos. So in a way, that kind of correspond to the hieroglyphics. The big thing about the phonetic difference in hieroglyphics is that the hieroglyphics are a process that is illustrated. But if the word means mythos in Greek, then that is the process of stringing them together to illustrate the myth.
Right.
And it's the myth that is real. Like, that's where the poetry of rhyme came in. It was just data entry. The dancing was just data entry because we didn't have paper, didn't have papyrus, didn't have a means of writing it down beyond stone. McLuhan had a joke. It's like, if everybody had to communicate on stone, the quality of writing would go up, up, up. Because you'd only be able to do 10 words a year or 10 letters a year.
Right.
Who knows? Yeah, 10 words probably.
The economy of words.
Yeah, that, the restrictions always allow the truth to, if you want the truth to come out, restrict something. And I think that's what's happening right now in some bizarre way. So where's the breaking point where we find the medium of practicality? I think we're getting there, but because it's the Nasturization of finance.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
the internet need to get their shit in order to see how they're going to.
Because the internet right now is the Wild West. The internet's the Wild West.
Yeah. The last thing is crypto. The last thing for a while is crypto. Then we're going to go inside. We're going to pay for stuff. It's still going to be delivered by drone. If you can move human beings out of the picture of the everyday mechanics, that's what's happening. But that now forces us to be all content creators. Everyone's Kanye West. Everyone's Marshall McLuhan. Everyone's all of this at the same time. And there's no teachers to tell us this except how to deal with it, except McLuhan, Harold Innis, people who realize what we're talking about, that it's like the medium, Samuel Butler, from 1700s, and there's tons, and everyone's going to find insights all the time. Agatha Christie wrote tons of mystery novels. So there's the template of the structure of that. Patterns. Who's an expert on the pattern they're an expert at? And how important is this pattern to anybody on Earth? Well, mystery. Now, there's a whole bunch of mysteries. So obviously, mystery writer's going to have some usage, but you have to start re-looking at, we take it for granted. Oh, we have all this crap in our basement that's like a receipt from a magazine. That receipt is like an NFT. You watch Antiques Roadshow, they're like, oh, do you have the box? If you had the box for that, it would be worth that much more.
Yeah.
The stuff that's, you get a show. What was one of your favorite television moment memories growing up?
When in Pokemon, when Ash gave up.
Okay, so if you had that show,
if I owned that moment,
it had the original commercials during the broadcast. The commercials would become the most important element of that. Whether you watched them or whether you left the room and came back, you would imagine, let's say you left the room and came back, you at your age then would remember that commercial because you'd probably seen it before, so you knew how much time you had before you had to get back. So that memory, that inconsequential memory of you leaving the TV screen and going somewhere else in your house, and then all the events that you were closer to at that point, all the situations that are completely insignificant invert and become the most significant memories when you reflect back on it.
That's
and
okay. Yeah.
As a whole, if you can recreate it, then you get the whole scale of that memory and you understand yourself better. Because now you see what you saw then, because that you liked it because you had the memory, but now all the things that you weren't paying attention to then are included in your memory, and you know that was the commercial. And so even if you weren't paying attention to it, the unconscious thoughts, because I have this theory that's like, when we play this back and everything that's happening right now outside of our conscious purview and outside of like the phone, that everything that's happening right now also plays back, that we will never know what was really happening. But those events come back too, and they must have some kind of effect. And what that effect is, I don't know, but it's part of this structure of what's being played back. And it's these kinds of things that somebody somewhere will come up with some sort of insight that's going to make a little more things that don't currently make sense to more people, which will then have it make sense to even more people.
And that's exactly what the whole cryptocurrency blockchain is. I got to go pick up my daughter because it's almost 6 here.
Okay, so, well, that's good.
But we got to do this again. But it's this idea of like, people put things forward, they don't catch on right away, but they're a precursor, like you said, to what's coming.
Yeah, and we all,
and it doesn't matter. It doesn't like people who are like, I don't do that. Like, I'm a Luddite. And it's like, it doesn't give a shit. Right?
Well, it's like they wouldn't even know that they were a Luddite if there wasn't technology to allow them to be able to tell us that they are a Luddite.
That's a great point. It's
like people that
I don't
say
like
not religious.
Facebook, but it's like, well, you're not saying that it doesn't exist. You're making a conscious decision not to. Like, if you're like, Facebook, what's that? Like, no, I don't do Facebook. It's very different.
Right. And then it's like, oh, were you Facebook phobic? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's like it becomes in parallel. You can say what you want about Mark Zuckerberg. I don't care. It doesn't matter about what your opinion is of him. But it's like, so every single person on Facebook, you're just going to write every single person that uses Facebook off. Sounds like you're Facebook phobic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point. And then when you're like, oh, anybody who has Facebook is XYZ.
Right. Oh, I don't have TV. Right. Let's just say, okay, so you're going to write off whole segments of society. Okay. Well, we'll have to do this again, Rob. It was a lot.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Richard Altman, thank you so much. I mean, like you said, I might have got 10% of this, and then I'll get another 10% next time.
Well, then we'll do it again next time.
I love it, man. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right, take it easy. Bye-bye.